Video in my Q&A answers, working my way through all the wonderful questions that have been asked. And yes, I do occasionally drink. Not that I buy that much, but I found one of these in my little fridge here, and I'm thirsty, warm a day, even though I'm wearing a jumper. That's nice. Just nice to have one occasionally. Alright, on with our next questions. I'm going to try and push through as many as I can this particular episode, as long as obviously we'll keep a bit of an eye on the time so I don't waffle too much. Next question is from On a Retro Trip. My questions would be, with regards to collecting, what are the benefits and hindrances of my location? Well, the benefits, I suppose in a way, one benefit was that were a lot of micros were supported with great gusto in Australia, and we even had specific brands brought out, like Dick Smith's brought in other machines and rebrand them as his own. We had the Micro Bee, which was made here in Australia, and we tended to support machines from all over the world. So you can actually find machines from America, from Europe, the UK, and also the Asian regions as well will show up in Australia. So as a retro computer collector, which I am, predominantly before I got into consoles as much as I have, I have been able to come across quite a few systems, and that's why I have over 100 different systems. And the retro computers are one of the favourite parts of my collection. So there's one of the benefits. The hindrances is that, there are, don't get me wrong, there are people who do have garage sales, and we do have some markets to go to, but I don't go to them very often, and I know there's things you need to go to on a regular basis, and just with my lifestyle and 4 kids and everything like that, I do not get the free time to go to these things. But every time I do, I still see the exact same people selling the exact same stuff for way too much money. So I really have very little chance of buying anything locally. Now there are a couple of, there's a couple of stores that sell Legos and collectible figurines and have the odd video games pop in, but majority of the time they are way too expensive. Over the last 5 or 6 months I have bought a few locally, but they have all been at negotiated lower prices, or ones that I've picked out that I've looked up and I went, well, that's more than I would normally spend, but it's still way less than what people are paying on eBay, and I really want to play the game, so I'll grab it, if you know what I mean. So the main hindrance is that eBay and other online sites are the main avenue for me to get new items in my collection, which is why at the end of the day, plus also my love of Japanese, the box artwork and everything like that, Japan is actually one of the cheapest places for me to go to get stuff, depending on what you're after. So a couple of good questions there. Now next question is from Kit171. He's been a subscriber of mine for quite some time, and myself with him as well. The old Atari computers, including the little portfolio one, which do you find the most interesting? I will actually grab a prop because not a lot of people know about the portfolio. Right, this is an Atari portfolio. So it's one of the opening up. Hinges a bit creaky there. So it's actually a fully portable PC compatible little machine, and I have the RS232 dongle component on there as well. This one works. Oh, it doesn't have any batteries in it at the moment. But this is actually, you know, a very small PC compatible machine that Atari brought out at one stage, and it is one of the more fascinating items in my collection, and also my Atari collection. Now, but he wants to know, which one do I find the most interesting? Actually, at the end of the day, I'm going to have to go with probably the original Atari 800 XL. I don't have an original 800. It's one of the items I would love to get in my collection. I do have a 400. That's got the membrane keyboard, but it's just their platform as a whole that I've always been interested in a lot. I used to sell them back in the day in the shop that I used to work in. We always had an 800 XL there. Later on, after around a little bit later than after I got my Atari ST, I actually came across a person selling an Atari 8-bit bundle, and that's actually when I owned an Atari 8-bit machine myself for the very first time. And I actually got an Atari 400 with a disk drive and an Atari 800 XL with a disk drive. The 800 XL might have even been from the store that I worked from and I bought it from. My memory's a little fuzzy about that. And I also can't remember when I sold it, but I definitely sold it, unfortunately. So all of the ones you see in my collection are ones that I've bought back since. So, good question. So, next we have Infected Flinch. And of course, not one for rules, he's branched out on the question numbers, but it's okay. There's some quite interesting ones. Number one, what is your favourite Terry Gilliam film? Well, I'm going to have to go right back to the start and go for Time Bandits. It is a fantastic movie, one that I realised only recently that I haven't actually seen for ages. We're actually talking about various characters and everything like that with my wife recently, so it's actually one that I wouldn't mind finding a copy of, so I'll have to have a look out we have Boxing Day sales the day after Christmas. Usually we go out as a family and have a look around for bargains. I'm going to have to see if I can find a copy of it. What is your favourite lake? Well, actually, I'm fairly lucky here in Tasmania, as we have lots and lots of lakes. I'd have to say my favourite lake is actually the Great Lake in the Central Highlands of Tasmania. I mean, it is massive, and it is a system of lakes and things. But I have been, and I know that's a loch, not a lake, but I have actually been to Loch Ness, and I actually pretty much like that one as well. But I have to go homegrown for my choice, and I'll go for the Great Lake in the Central Highlands of Tasmania. Have you ever touched a hedgehog? I haven't touched a virtual hedgehog or a real hedgehog, but I have touched an echidna, which is Australia's animal that's sort of like a hedgehog but is not. I'll try and flash up a picture just to show you the difference. And we actually see them quite often. We have a holiday home which is basically on the east coast of Tasmania, on a little peninsula called the Tasmanian Peninsula, and we actually see them a lot more down there, especially when you go for a bushwalk or something like that. But echidnas are quite numerous around here. I mean, obviously in populated areas you don't see them so much, but as soon as you get out of town, and depending on the time of the year, you may see one near the side of the road. They do sometimes go across the road, but you don't see a lot of squashed ones, so they're obviously fairly careful. They come out at night too, a lot more than the daytime. Number 4, what's up with carrier bags? I actually don't really have an answer for that one. That one's caught me a bit unawares. What's up with carrier bags? He's just trying to get me to think outside the box, I think. What's up with carrier bags? No, I'm going to leave that one. 5, one word, Salamander. Well, Salamander is a game that I've been after for the Saturn for a long time. It's a game that is one of my favourites from my MSX collection. I've never actually played it in the arcades. I do have it for the PC Engine, and that was a pretty fantastic version, and only 1 week ago I got it for the Saturn, and I definitely have to agree with a lot of other people that it's definitely the best home version. Final question. Do you ever feel that retro gaming will die as popular hobby it is, or will it live on? What I think is that over time the retro systems that people consider retro will change. But there will always be a group of people at a certain age who will want to play games on the systems that they had as a kid. Now I suppose the danger is that the young kids of today are growing up with their Xbox Ones and their PlayStation 4s, and a lot of the games don't even work when you first buy them. They have to patch immediately or they won't work. So going back and playing any of these games 10 years down the track, or 20 years or 30 years like a lot of us are doing, is probably not going to work very well. It's actually going to be very interesting how things go. And then the older stuff, it will depend on how much of a connection some of the younger generation of gamers get with the older stuff. It may just become too old. I do believe that the current retro collecting thing, I mean, it still has a lot of momentum left in it, but it is a bubble that will change over time. I mean, at the moment, as an example, Atari 2600 is actually quite often too old for a lot of people to play. You have to be of a certain age and have a certain level of nostalgia for the Atari 2600 and the Intellivision to collect those. And because of that, prices of games for those systems are actually quite low. The main bubble at the moment is around the Nintendo, Sega Master System, Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo eras. So what you'll find is that actual original Nintendo will actually eventually will plateau and go down a little bit, and Super Nintendo and Genesis will become more important. But then after that you have the other physical systems that followed. So you've got your original Xbox and your PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, so you've got all those systems to come. So we've got quite a few more years before I believe the nostalgia bubble will run out of systems that they can go back to. So I think we've got a while to go yet, but I do believe it probably does have an end at some stage. So hopefully I've answered that. Right, next question is from my good mate lactobacillusprime. And his first question is, when are you coming to visit? As I think I talked about last time, travel, my wife and I definitely want to travel and go on a holiday. Europe and the UK are some of on our higher list of places where we want to go, so the chances are high that could be where we're coming first. There is probably more of a chance of me coming by myself for either work related or retro homebrew development related. But anyway, I'm putting some money aside from my homebrew development, plus also some frequent flyer points I have, to perhaps be able to make it over to the UK, perhaps Europe at some stage. I can't guarantee what will happen next year. I had hoped to have my second daughter driving by now, but that hasn't happened as yet. She's far too busy doing other things, so we'll have to wait and see. Now Mark's next question is quite interesting. Will you ever make a media swarm on the Commodore 64? As part of my Let's Make a Retro Game series, I have indicated that I'm not just covering the Z80 machines, that I would go over to the 650X type machines of the Atari and the Commodore 64 for that. And once I get comfortable with the platform, actually, to get into it more, I like looking at how some of the games that I wrote back in the day could be ported over to those systems and how they'd run. Now I've done that with the Nintendo, which I wasn't intending to, I wasn't on my list for the systems, but ended up being there. So I've already learnt my 650X series processor code, and I have actually converted Media Swarm over to the Nintendo. So there's no reason why not, once I start learning the architecture and ins and outs of the Commodore 64, that I wouldn't convert my Media Swarm to the Commodore 64. And actually, because Media Swarm has a lot of physics, moving objects, and is a single screen non-scrolling type of game, it's actually a very good exercise converting that game to a system to make sure that you have actually understood what the system can do. So when I do write a Commodore 64 game, other than the Mega Blast, which is part of the Let's Make a Retro Game series, it's probably one of the first things that I'll write for the Commodore 64. So, some more beer. Number 3. How do you cope with your time zone and reverse seasons? Well, I suppose I take it from the attitude of our seasons are around the right way and you guys' seasons are around the wrong way. But yes, we're used to summer at Christmas. It is actually interesting when you watch movies, you know, American movies and European movies, and it's Christmas and there's snow. Being here in Australia, we don't necessarily equate, you know, snow with Christmas as much. Although we do, you know, decorate our Christmas windows with frosting and everything like that, but we just do it in the sun. Now, time zones, obviously my time zone can be a bit of a pain. I am equally distant from both the UK and the US in time zones, plus and minus basically 10, and it can make, you know, Skyping with people very difficult with times. As an example, I've been talking to a gentleman in Canada, and it's either got to be first thing in the morning for him and really late at night for me, or really late at night for me and middle of the day for him. So it does make it very difficult, but we get around it. And but one of the things when I travel, I would assume that would be one of the most interesting things, seeing how the weather changes when you cross hemispheres. I have done so though. I have actually been to the Northern Hemisphere before, but it was during, I believe, our spring and autumn over there, so it wasn't too cold or anything like that. So I haven't actually really experienced any place with a massive amount of snow, because that's the other thing. In winter, we don't really get snow here. Every 10 years, we may get snow down at street level, which actually happened this year, and we got to see some snow. Alright, some excellent questions from Mark. We'll go to my next page. As I said, I'm trying to get through a few here. So next is from Gashead Steve. Do you remember the first game you bought and how much it cost? Technically, the first game for a system that I bought would have been TI Invaders. And it came with the TI 99-4 that I bought off somebody. Now I bought that system for $650, and I suppose up to conjecture of how much that game cost. So let's go forward a bit of time. I didn't actually buy any games for my original Spectre video because I couldn't afford them at the time. That's why I wrote so many. 2 came with it, which were Spectron and Armoured Assault. I would have bought titles for it later on when they were being cleared out. Then you go along to the MSX, and I did actually buy one game, and that game was Chiller. Now it was a Mastertronics game, which probably would have been 99p or 199 at the most over in the UK. I believe back in the 1985, I paid $9.99 for that game. And at the time I can remember being a little disappointed. Although it was good enough for me to buy, and I did try it out in the shop, but it was the only thing I could afford at the time. Yeah, I do believe that was the first. Okay, sorry about the cut there. I had a coffee fit. If you wrote a biography of your life, what do you think would be the most shocking part? The shocking part. I like to think myself as a fairly unshocking person, in a little bit way boring, I suppose. Well, I suppose that I actually have already travelled so much, I suppose. I've been to Japan 4 times, Malaysia, physically to Malaysia twice, Singapore twice, I've been to Texas, I've been to the UK, and I've been on a drive around Europe. That was all the way back when I was 20. I've been to Vanuatu either 4 or 5 times, and wrote wrote the software program that is used by most of the businesses in Vanuatu. This is a few years ago now, they might have changed by now. But at last count they were using the software. In actual fact, the guy that owns most of the businesses there actually bought that business off me when I decided to move on to other things. So he probably still is using that software because he'd have a vested interest in it. 3. If I bung a tenner, can you fix it for me to win? Well, I mean, it's very tempting, especially since as a tenner would be £10, which over here is like 25, at least 25 Australian dollars, and that's a fair bit of money. But yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to let the computer choose, so it's up to random chance. Sorry, Steve. Alright, next is Alastair Brown. Number 1, if Konami were to make one more MSX game, and the choice of the game was up to you, what would it be? I do believe there is a Contra for the MSX by Konami, but I've never actually seen it, and I do actually avoid playing ROMs of MSX games because it's a primary system that I collect for. But something Contra-like would be good. I mean, I remember all the hype about Green Beret back in the time, and how that's, you know, it was a side-scrolling run and gunner, if you know what I mean. So it'd be great, Contra-like or Metal Slug-like. I actually quite like those games. So if maybe Konami made the second one of the Contra games for the MSX, and probably obviously the MSX2 or MSX2 Plus, like they did with Space Mambo. They made that both, so it'd run on MSX2 machines, but it also, when it was an MSX2 Plus machine, it could use the extra abilities of the machine. It'd be quite interesting to see what the second Contra would be like for the MSX, and probably be my pick. Yeah, and you never know. I actually like run and gunner so much. I may write one myself one day, but it's a big exercise on an MSX machine because of the sprite limits. But anyway. 2. Are you aware that Antarctic Adventure and Penguin Adventure on the MSX are 2 different games? Up until recently, all I knew about was Antarctic Adventure, because that's the game, one of the original games that we had for Konami for the MSX when they first came out. But I have known, I mean, when I say recent times, you're talking the last couple of years, I did find out about Penguin Adventure. Once again, I still haven't played it. I actually have another game coming, although I do believe it's just the Japanese full box of Antarctic Adventure, but if I've made a mistake, I may have actually ended up with Penguin Adventure, so I'll have to wait and see. At least a month or so shipping time to wait for that one. That's the trouble with getting stuff from Japan, and the exchange rate being so bad, you have cannot afford to use any of the faster shipping options. Number 3, what is the chance of you making it over to an event in the UK next year? If you're coming, MSX UK will try to be at the same event. Next year, it will really depend on finances and kits. I would really like to try and get to Blackpool, Manchester being later in the year is a hard time of the year, although it's got a higher chance because it's got more time to save up. Like at the moment I don't have the money to fly over there. It's actually very expensive to fly to the UK, unfortunately. I probably do have enough frequent flyer points to get to the UK, so I've just got to sort out what I need to do is I need to finish more of my homebrew games, get them released, and all you lot out there, buy some of them, and then I can, if I put half of what I earn towards that, I'll be able to come over sooner, won't I? Because one of the people I would like to come over, especially Blackpool and Manchester, I would like to meet Jeff Minter, one of my you know, heroes from back in the day myself. So that would be great. Okay, now I'll squeeze in one more, and the next person in the line is the Highlander, and he's actually done a video set of questions. So he'll get 3 chances in the competition, of course, and yeah. Alright, let's go find out his questions now.
So, Electric Adventures, Tony, 1,500 subscribers. Tony, congratulations. You've been around longer than I don't know, longer than I can remember. You've been around a long time. So 1,500 subscribers. That's quite a lot. I don't even have 500, so I'm way behind on you. But like you said, it's not about subscribers. We don't pay much attention to the subscriber count, maybe, but I know that everybody keeps a watchful eye on what the counter says. But I think you know. And Tony, I mean, this is not one of the questions that I wanted to ask, but I think you would probably agree that not all of those subscribers watch all of your videos and comment on all of them. So I wonder what the you know, what the going rate is, basically. How, you know, what percentage of viewers, of what percentage of your subscribers actually views your videos and responds to them. I don't know. Anyway, 3 questions, because I'm going to enter in your competition. Although I don't even have an MSX or a ColecoVision or whatever, I just want to see you send something across the world to me, and I'll send you something back. I don't know what. I mean, it's not the prizes, but I just wanted to get in on the action, so to speak. So, my first question. I know that as Electric Adventures you had a store, and you've talked about it a couple of times, and I think I understand what kind of store it was, and you sold games, I gather, but would you describe like a typical day in your store? What did you do? What was it like? How busy was it? What did you sell? Where did you buy your stuff? And you know, I'm just curious as you know, what was it like? And I could ask a million other questions, like why did you start and why did you stop and what happened and all that, but that would, you know, I don't want to spend my 3 questions like that. But just, would you describe a typical day in the Electric Adventures store? And maybe you could like show us a couple of pictures if you have any. I don't know. It would be fun to see. So that was my first question. My second question is maybe a bit more technical, but not so much. Nothing can be too technical for you, I think. But you being a programmer, I know that you're, you know, programming is your profession, and but also your hobby. And so you make video games, but you also make business software. Now, I wonder how you feel about this. Is a video game programmer the same thing as being a business software programmer? Do the same techniques apply? Do the same design patterns occur? Does anything transfer from one to the other? Just wondering, and you would be the person to answer that question. So yeah, that's my second question. And my third question, and I'm going to get really technical now, is when we talk about video game programming, and imagine you know, a retro game, an 8-bit system with well, a game that goes with that era. Now, the main game loop. I know that as systems have gotten faster, the main game loop has to take into account the speed of the system. Maybe that wasn't so much the case, when the systems were running at a megahertz, or 2. Now, in that era, in that kind of programming, what is your preferred technique for handling the timing of the main game loop? I bet you didn't see that one coming, so good luck answering that one. Those are my 3 questions, my three questions, and I can't wait to see your answers.
Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed the Highlanders or Wooters questions. My answers are as follows, and sorry I scribbled these ones down, so if I'm squinting you'll know why. So number 1, I have talked about in the past that I used to run Electric Adventures as an actual I used the same name. So Electric Adventures was my original name, publishing games. I kept the name all that time, and then when I opened a retail store, which was a science fiction and fantasy retail store, it was 30% of the store was books, so science fiction and fantasy books, and that part of the store did very well. We also had videos and laserdiscs in a smaller video section. We sold collectible cards, which were behind the counter. I had a whole section for Games Workshop and miniatures and board games, and I even had a little rear area in the part of the store where I had a pair of virtual reality machines and a couple of arcade machines. And actually those arcade machines were there was Street Fighter 2, which the coin box always kept on getting filled up all the time. I'm just struggling to remember what the other game was. I had a second machine. Anyway, it might come back to me. I may have either some pictures or video footage from the virtual reality machine. I'll just have to see whether I can find it and insert it in here so you can have a look, because his other part of his question was if I had any footage or pictures if I could show.
Intruder alert. All guards to Zone 2.
Virtuality presents Zone Hunter. 360-degree, three-dimensional experience for 1 or 2 players that challenges you to take the role of a 21st century urban warrior in a deadly search and destroy mission. You will have to master state-of-the-art firepower to survive the cyborg guards, watchdog droids, and nightmare aliens you'll encounter in your desperate life-or-death quest to infiltrate the increasingly deadly city zones and immobilize the alien transport ship guarded by the awesome hangar guard. It's a race against the clock, with enemy fire slowing you down, but with bonus time checkpoints giving precious extra time. To achieve your mission, you can work alone or as a team, helping each other to annihilate the evil life forms of the alien city, or competing head-to-head in a race to reach the final objective. You can communicate with your partner using voice-activated microphones inside the Gazettes. To enter your 3D world, you must first enter the tracking ring. Place the lightweight Gazette on your head and adjust the fit if necessary. Adjustment of the stereo headphones are at the side, as are the eye focus controls. Close one eye at a time and slowly adjust the other to get the sharp picture. Now take your space joystick. Press the top button to move forward and the trigger to fire your weapon. Alternately, if the enemy is close enough, you can punch them out of the way. Once inside the game, you will be given your mission objectives and a recap of the controls.
This is your mission. You will be dropped outside the enemy city and must penetrate the Genetics Corporation building with a transport ship.
Points are obtained by blasting anything that moves. Additional targets may also consist of stationary objects, such as crates or fuel tanks. Some targets will contain valuable bonus points. Different power-up pods are hidden throughout the zone, providing invincibility or turbo speed for limited amounts of time. Weapons upgrade pods provide limited use of a more powerful weapon, essential for some of the more stubborn attack squads.
You're now entering the city complex. Watch out for guards.
Zone Hunter is a skill-based mission set against the clock. The better you are, the further you get, and the longer you play. Set in 360 degrees of virtuality, with stereo digital sound and stunning 3D graphics. It's an urban walk on the wild side, in a virtual world that will blow your mind. And the only way that you can experience it is to step inside.
I also had my Sega Mega Drive, the Super NES and Atari Jaguar in the store, and people could pay money with a timer and play games on them. And that's where those systems sat. Unfortunately, we only ever got the one Atari Jaguar because the Atari distributors in Australia went out of business. Somebody took me out of the Jaguar, and I thought I could get another one later, and I never did. That's why I have finally gotten hold of one recently and gotten back into ones. But the Mega Drive I sold to my brother-in-law when I shut the shop down, and I have got some of those cartridges back. 6 months later I bought a system back, and that's the one I have. The Super Nintendo that I had in the store is the one that's over there. It's one of the ones that survived when we got robbed. It was actually in a drawer away from everything else. Some of the games got stolen, but I actually have the original system. So there's some of the things I had in the store. Right, question number 2. He was sort of asking, so a person who programs video games and a person who programs business software, are they the same sort of programmer? And I'd have to say there's not a lot of commonality between the two. Quite often a person who programs video games is actually a higher skill level of actual of making code work. Business software is all about ensuring that software is maintainable into the future, whereas quite often programming a video game, you're trying to make it work as efficiently as possible, as quickly as possible, and then you usually don't, you move on to the next game and the next thing. I suppose it's a little bit of a different case in modern software. It's gotten so huge and worked on by so many people, they never get it right when it's released now. Sorry, there might be a bit of a rough cut there. I got interrupted, as usual happens in this thing. So I think what I was basically up to saying was that the skills, programming in general, the actual programming skills I find in the business world are actually a lot lower than the programming skills that are needed for video game development. Video game development, you need to know your system that you're working on, or even your library. You really need to know it very well, whereas business software is more about capturing requirements and ensuring that the functionality delivered does what the business wants. But it's not necessarily about optimizing it, making it run fast and everything like that. All of those things are important, but they're not the highest priority. So there are completely different programmers for each. And you know, even the business side of things is split up into multiple different fields of expertise. And actually what I find in my travels is there is a lot of people specialised in very niche particular fields, and they're not very flexible about being able to do, you know, to jump in and do tasks at different things. A skill that I myself am lucky that I have. To me, the language doesn't really matter. Plus, I've had a lot of experience with lots of large data, so I also know all about that as well. Now, number 3, timing of the main game loop. When you mention modern systems and old systems, so as a bit of an intro to that, obviously in a modern system, the processes are so fast and everything like that. everything has progressed towards what I call event-driven programming. So your code will get signaled when particular things happen, and then you run a bit of code, and it's only where your code runs too long before the next one of those interrupts is due to arrive where you have problems. Back in the 8-bit days, you had to trigger your code off. You needed some form of timer. Now, modern computers have lots of timers. They've got real-time clocks. They've got all sorts of inputs and outputs, all which would be generating signals. I'll give you the Coleco as an example. Coleco is an example of a machine that has virtually no interrupts whatsoever. The only one you get is the vertical blank interrupt. Now, vertical blank is when the TV is drawing your graphics on your screen. It's going crossways like that. When it goes across, when it goes back to the other side to start drawing again, that's called a horizontal blank. And some very early machines like the Atari 2600 and the Ataris and on towards the Commodore 64 you can do something at a horizontal blank. There actually is a signal generated then. But quite a lot of machines, the only thing they have is that when it gets to the end of a frame, so down here, there is a period of time it takes the scanner to go up to the top of the screen and start again, and that's called the vertical blank. Now, TV screens in PAL territories, that happens 50 times a second, and in NTSC regions that happens 60 times a second. So that is your one timer to time everything from. So depending on the machine, some machines are multi-regional and actually have settings to tell you which region they're in. Sorry, not my night for making videos. Interrupted again, go do a taxi run. So I'm explaining the vertical blank and everything like that. So that's your timing source. So, you know, on PAL machines 50 times a second and NTSC machines 60 times a second, you will get this signal, and then you need to calculate everything. I know it's the speed of all your objects that you're moving using those two measurements, and that's why. The NES is another machine that doesn't have another timing source except in cartridges that add one. NES was actually very expandable in its cartridge port, and why a game that hasn't been programmed for a region, the music will play at the wrong speed when you insert it in another machine, because there's no way to say to ask the machine which region it's from. The Coleco is lucky in that respect. There's actually a byte in the BIOS that tells you whether it's a 50 or 60 Hertz machine, so you've got some idea. Otherwise, a lot of machines actually have to run a little timing routine when the game starts to try and figure out you know, how fast the machine is. But most of those machines actually have another clock, like the Commodore 64. You actually do have a small clock source as well, I believe. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to time anything. So it gets very difficult. Another common mistake that people make with the game loop is they try to put everything in the section of code where the vertical blank is happening. It is a period of time, but if you think about it, the time the computer's taking to actually draw the screen is actually a lot more than the time it's just taking for the beam to go from down here up to there and start drawing again. So you really need to break your game up into the components that draw stuff to the screen, which you have to do when it's not drawing to the screen in a lot of the system's cases, and your other code that works out you know, the logic of your game needs to run during the other amount of time. So hopefully that hasn't gotten too downbeat and technical, and that you've gotten something out of it. And thank you very much for those questions, Wouter. They're all very much appreciated. And I hope this video hasn't gone too long. I'm going to have to edit it more than I normally would like with these ones, because I've been interrupted multiple times, had a coughing fit and everything like that. But I'm enjoying answering these videos. I actually really intended to do this particular answer video on the weekend, but I didn't get one chance. So I've done it after work today on a Monday, and Mondays I run the kids all over the place, and yeah, so I'm probably looking a little tired too, so that's why beer came out as well. So now probably by the time I edit this and upload this, we'll only have a day or so to go before my competition closes. As soon as possible, once the date passes, I'll put all the names down and we'll do the actual drawing video. So we'll get the competition part over, but I'll still keep on going with these question and answer videos. As I said, I'm enjoying them quite a lot, and there's lots more questions to go. So I'll put a link to all of the channels who've asked me questions in this episode down below, and a link to the previous episodes as well, if you haven't watched those. Alright, I'm Electric Adventures. Thanks to all my subscribers, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.